How to change your mind, or preparing your brain to see the world in a different way. Introduction. Before jumping right into the monumental task of installing a new cultural operating system, it's important to call out how difficult that can be for most people. We all have our sense of identity, sense of community, and plans for the future tied up in our understanding of the world, all deeply intertwined with our social contracts. As a result of our psychological and social wiring, we may feel personally under attack when that social contract is under attack. So before we begin, let's take a moment to think about how we think and disarm our egos. Part 1. The structure of a belief. To begin, let's talk about what it means to change your mind. This isn't something we often think about, but what are the actual mechanics of a made-up mind? When we change our mind, what is actually changing? Here's how I understand it. A belief that we hold is just the sum of all the information we have. If I believe that my coworker is lazy, it's because I have observed enough of their behaviors that I understand to be lazy. Since that belief is actually just the sum of all the information I have, there are two ways for me to change my mind about the coworker. I can either observe enough new, not lazy behavior that outweighs the old observations, or I can gain new information that changes my understanding of the original behaviors. So let's say that your coworker was consistently showing up to work an hour late. Every time they arrived late, that's a new data point that you add to your lazy belief. If they suddenly started showing up on time, you would need to see a long-term pattern before you changed your mind, right? If they've been consistently late for 5 years, it would probably take a very long time to believe that they were now reliable. If it had only been a week of lateness, maybe another week or two of being on time would be enough. Again, the belief comes from the sum of all the information we have, so the amount of old observations affect how many new ones you'd need to see. However, let's say instead that one day you overhear your boss talking to that coworker, and you find out that they had been tasked with going to visit a client in another town early every morning. What you thought was laziness was actually them getting up early to take on additional responsibility. With only that single data point, your entire belief changes, right? All of those old data points that you used to see as lazy, you now see as dependable. Both of these examples of changing your mind occurred by acquiring new information. In one case, it was a lot of little pieces of information that showed a stable behavior shift of showing up on time. And in the other case, it was a single piece of information that shifted your entire understanding of the old information. Thinking about it this way shows something new. We never change our minds, we only expand them. When we get new information, it might add a new context that changes how we see the old information, like in the example of our unreliable coworker. Even when we think we change our minds because we threw out old ideas, it's actually still an additive process. For example, if Warren tells us that he saw a werewolf, but then over time we come to learn that Warren has a habit of telling lies, we still have the information that Warren said he saw a werewolf. But now it is also paired up with Warren lies all the time. Our belief that a werewolf existed changes over time based on the information. First that someone said they had seen one, and then later adding that that person tends to lie. Maybe we never believed Warren in the first place, but only because we had other information that convinced us prior that werewolves don't exist. Unfortunately, this system is easy to fool. Since our brain processes so much information, it tends to take as many shortcuts as it can. People who want to try to influence our decision-making, like politicians, media, and marketers, will bombard us with so much information that we have no time to vet it for accuracy. So, if Warren has been telling everyone who will listen that he's seen a werewolf, you might overhear people on the bus talking about the werewolf, people at work talking about the werewolf, and maybe even people on the news talking about the werewolf, overloading your brain into thinking, if everyone's talking about this werewolf, it has a higher likelihood of being real. Now that Warren has gotten the information out into broad circulation, you don't even know that he is the root source of the information. So finding out that Warren is a habitual liar no longer changes your understanding of the werewolf situation. There are three main takeaways here. 1. What we believe is just the sum of all the information we have. 2. There should be no shame in changing your mind, since nothing is changing. The information you have is only expanding. You're not going back on previously held beliefs. You are moving forward closer to the truth. And 3, be extra careful about information that you can't fully trace. Your brain will still use it to draw conclusions, but it is very difficult for it to be reframed by new information you encounter later. Part 2. Social barriers. The second thing to think about before trying to change your worldview is the social barriers that can prevent us from changing our minds. Humans are deeply social beings, and our brains are wired to seek and maintain social approval. Even those who feel like loners or outcasts tend to find community with other loners and outcasts. We can all individually reason about what we discussed in the first section, how our minds can change or expand as we learn new information, and how that's a good thing. But once there are social dynamics involved, it can be more difficult to accept the new conclusions we've reached. For instance, if you have some friends at work that have inside jokes making fun of your coworker for being lazy and late all the time, it can be difficult to bring up the new information that the coworker is not lazy to the group, since it risks disturbing the social dynamic. Likewise, it can be difficult to accept that werewolves don't exist if your entire family is convinced that they're real and talk about them all the time, frequently inviting Warren over for dinner to tell stories about his encounters. These social barriers can prevent you from speaking out in the first case, or creating reinforcing feedback loops of information that are hard to escape from in the second. There are no easy answers to these social problems, and this is where the real work of changing the world will come from. We all need to practice being leaders among our peers and do our best to help each other see our blind spots by sharing information that let us see the bigger picture. Remember, our beliefs are the sum of the information we have, so sharing information and perspectives with others can help us all grow toward common understandings. So, in practice, I suggest that if this series of videos resonates with you, find a close friend or two and have them watch it with you. Discuss the ideas and how you all responded to them. Spreading this information and this way of thinking among your social group makes it easier to communicate with them and more likely that the ideas won't be shut down by social disapproval. At the very least, you can all discuss these ideas together and decide if they make sense to you. In conclusion, I could write an entire book on the psychological tricks that can trip us up and close us off to new ideas. However, most of those ideas will come up in one way or another when we get into the meat of cooperative coalescence, since it is built on top of concepts from complex systems and cognitive psychology. So for now, I hope these first 2 pointers help open you up to the ideas that are about to come. Our final takeaways: 1. Our beliefs are made up of the sum of all the information we have on a given topic, and because of that, we don't change our minds, but expand them by learning new information. 2. Social expectations can prevent us from accepting new information, so finding a friend or friends to learn with can help reduce the odds of social pressures cutting you off from growth.